Welcome to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and I'm really happy to bring on one of my friends from the cheese world, and that is Padgett Arnold. And she's with Sequatchie Cove Creamery. And I'm really excited because I have some fantastic cheeses that we're going to be tasting today, and I'm really looking forward to this. So I'm going to turn it over to Padgett. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you to Eric and Nora from Counter for helping us facilitate this. I've been really looking forward to it. I'm Padgett Arnold from Sequatchie Cove Creamery, and we are located right outside of Chattanooga in the Sequatchie Valley, which is approximately 30 miles northwest of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it's quite a spectacular valley. We've been farming in Sequatchie since 2003. Nathan, my husband, who's also the cheesemaker and my business partner in the creamery, he started farming at Sequatchie Cove in 2003, and I came on in 2006. And our original role at the farm was growing vegetables. So we had a 10-year career, about 10 years or so, full-time farming, market gardening, growing vegetables, cut flowers and herbs and fruit. And along the way, over that decade time, Nathan particularly became much more interested in the agricultural component at Sequatchie Cove that was managing the animals. Sequatchie Cove Farm is a very diversified farm. And the dairy component, the dairy and now the cheese making were kind of the very last enterprise to come about there. There's grass-fed beef, lamb, pork, chickens for eggs and meat, as well as a large variety of herbs and vegetables. So along the way, Nathan really fell in love with the cows. Ultimately, we just love cows, and we wanted to figure out how to stay on this beautiful farm, create a livelihood for ourselves, support multiple families on this farm, and milking cows and making cheese became the focus. I think this was around 2004 when we visited Torino, Italy for the first Terra Madre, which is a slow food conference that happens every other year, and it brings farmers and food producers together from all over the world. So at that conference, we were exposed to cheese making, and not just cheese making, but very traditional cheeses that have been around for generations and hundreds and hundreds of years. And just that, I think the idea of farmstead cheese making really was born out of that visit to Italy. And so then we came back to the farm and really started dreaming about how to create a farmstead, cow, dairy, and cheese making operation at Sequatchie Cove. Nathan started working on that in 2005. We started building our milking herd, and he was studying cheese making. And along that time, I was still growing vegetables and trying to earn a living for us. So he traveled to Vermont, he traveled to Canada, he traveled to Wisconsin, and then ultimately to France on a big research trip. And those were very formative years in terms of the types of cheeses that we became very inspired to, sort of model ultimately the cheeses that we make now have been inspired by traditional cheeses of the Alpine regions of Europe. And then after that, even just, getting to know the American artisan cheese movement and those amazing makers here in the United States, and a lot of influence from those individuals has also played into the types of cheeses that we make today. So we have, for our tasting today, we have 5 cheeses, and they're not necessarily in the order that we created them. The first cheese that we ever made in 2010 when we founded the creamery was Cumberland. That's our tome, which will be the second cheese in our lineup for our tasting. So I came in as sort of I'm not the cheesemaker. I will say I'm always sort of like quick to let people know I'm not on the production side. I don't make cheese. My husband is definitely 100% production. And my role has to do with selling the cheese, working with the customers, communicating, and, of course, also managing our team and just everything that revolves around sales and business administration. So that's really where I come in. And so here's the next slide, which brings me to our amazing team. This group of folks has been working with us now for a little over a year and a half. We've had this unit of people, and the magic that we have is just really remarkable. I feel like there's just a rapport, there's a sense of dedication, very independent, just really amazing people dedicated to what they do. So I'll just go down the row very quickly from left to right. My husband, Nathan, is our sort of head of production. And then just behind him is Matt Alexander, who is head of affinage. And in the back, that's Connor Leary, and he is a full-time farmer. He's on the dairy side. So he manages the herd, the pasture, the breeding, and ultimately the milk production and milk quality. Myself in the center, and Randall Tomlinson, who runs the dairy. He's been with us since 2011, so basically since the very beginning. And he runs the dairy, manages the herd, manages the breeding, and oversees the pasture management and everything that has to do with milk production. I can't say enough about how dedicated Randall has been over the years to our project and our business. Lauren Ateka in the front, and she is my inventory manager and my right-hand woman. She keeps everything organized and manages basically all the products as they are being ready for sale. As well as she's very dedicated to her role leaf wrapping the Shakerag Blue, which is a really, really large amount of labor that goes into that. So she manages that as well. And then Ken Smart in the back, he's a part-time farmer, helps us with milking the cows and generally keeping the farm in order. And Alexa Whitehead on the far right, and she's a full-time cheesemaker. So this is our very small, very dedicated team. And the one person in this picture that we've really enjoyed working with this year, that's not in this picture, excuse me, who joined our team back in March as an intern is Holden Strub. And I want to mention his name because he's just been an amazing intern and really much more than that, just an awesome member of the team. And he will be leaving us at the end of August. We are very small, but very dedicated. And what we do really starts with the farming. And since Nathan and I kind of came from a farming background, it's very important to us to maintain a farmstead component to our model, which we are planning to expand from, but we will maintain a herd of cows so that we have our own milk supply for the majority of the cheeses that we make. So I believe the next slide shows the farm. That's kind of just an overhead picture. That's the dairy complex, I guess you want to say, which is right in the center of the farm. You can see that we're solar powered, and we milk the cows twice a day, 7 days a week. They come into the milking barn, which is adjacent to the cheese making facility. So the milk comes in one end of the building, literally is made into cheese, aged, and then ready for sale, and goes out the other end of the building. So we've designed the cheese facility so that it kind of moves in one direction like that. But we have about 100 acres of pasture. You can only see a very small component of that in the photo there. All the pastures are sort of smaller fields that are divided up by trees and little waterways. There's a lot of water that surrounds the farm, but it's a really beautiful area. We're in Coppinger Cove, which is a sort of a small inlet that runs sort of into the Cumberland Plateau. We're at the very base of the Cumberland Plateau where it comes down to the Sequatchie River. So we're surrounded by mountains on 3 sides of the farm. So it's a small farm. We only have about 100 acres of pasture, and each of those fields are very small. So the way that we manage our dairy is through intensive rotational grazing. And it's a very labor-intensive practice. We move the cows at least once, maybe 2 times a day, as well as milking them. So the animals are always on the move. We're giving them paddocks of fresh grass at least once or twice a day, so that we keep the animals in a relatively small area, but we graze down that area intensively before they are moved to the next patch of fresh pasture. The cows are on grass 365 days a year. Being in Tennessee, we're a relatively warm climate. We can leave the animals out on pasture, and we are very deliberate about our seeding annual forage crops for the animals. So we seed cool season forage crops for the winter, the fall and the winter grazing, and then warm season forage species for spring and summer grazing. So we're always trying to have something growing, something, you know, actively alive out there in the pasture for those animals. And because of our system, we also do some specialized breeding. And we really got started breeding our herd pretty intentionally and using artificial insemination to introduce some genetics from New Zealand and from some breeds in the Alpine regions of Europe. So European and New Zealand influences that we have been working with and crossing what was originally a primarily Jersey-based herd of animals. We had some Jersey, a little bit of Holstein, and then we started introducing the New Zealand and European breeds about 4 years ago. And we've gotten to where now our herd is primarily, or almost 100%, made up of cows that were born on the farm with this very intentional breeding system. And what we're hoping to gain from that is twofold. First of all, the New Zealand breeds, utilizing those genetics with the Jersey genetics, trying to create an animal that is very well adapted to the heat of our climate and also very well adapted to a grass-based dairy system like the intensive rotational grazing and having cows primarily eating grass, but also being milk producers, which is really hard to do. And of course we do supplement their diet, but we're trying to be as minimal as we can about how much we're supplementing from off-farm feed like corn, soy, and hay that's produced off the farm. So we're utilizing genetics from New Zealand to optimize how cows turn the grass into milk, and the European genetics to optimize the milk itself. The components of the milk, which would be the fat to protein ratio in the milk. And what we're really trying to do is zero in on the optimum ratio of components for cheese making. So this is very different from the way that breeders would look at the milk and the components for fluid milk production, for example. So cheese milk is very specific, and we're really trying to dial in the milk and the components and really optimize the quality for cheese making. And it's very challenging. This is not an easy thing to do. It's not being done very much. So we're sort of pioneering a little bit as far as being a dairy farm in the South, producing milk on grass, and also using that milk to create a value-added product like cheese. So it's a big learning curve, and for breeding animals, anything really that you do takes 2 or 3 years before you see the results. So we're still very much in the early stages of our learning curve with all that. So the next slide shows a vat of freshly coagulated milk. We make cheese, I'd say 6 times a week right now. We're at pretty much the peak season. We're a little bit past the actual very peak and now starting to slowly scale back a little bit, but not too much. We're going to be drying the cows off in December, so we still have several months left in our dairy season. but we milk cows twice a day and make cheese almost every day of the week. So the milk is extremely fresh. We're paying very close attention to that quality and the freshness, the components, just everything that's going into that vat before it even becomes a batch of cheese. And I believe the next slide gives a little run through, very brief, step-by-step description of what you do to make a batch of cheese. And all these steps really happen the day that the cheese is made. But for most of the cheeses that we make, that's one day in a very, very long process. Once the cheese is made, the aging is really the majority of what goes into the cheese in both time and labor. That's my husband, by the way, that photo of him. It's one of my favorite pictures that we have. I wish we had more action photos in the make room because there's so many things that are hard to describe without the visual. But I think that particular shot was of hooping the curd for one of our blue cheeses. So after the cheese is made on day one and it's salted, then it is brought into the aging room. And from there, it stays in there anywhere from 3 weeks all the way to, I'd say, 6 months. And this picture here is a shot of Cumberland, sort of a close-up of the rind midway through development of the Cumberland, which is our tome, and definitely one of the most wild natural rind cheeses that we make. We really just kind of let it go crazy. We do very minimum amount of control on the what's going on with the rind. We pat it, we flip, we rotate the wheels, but we try to not disturb that microflora as much as we can. We have an aging room that's dedicated to the natural rind cheeses and the blue cheeses. So we have the Bellamy Blue, the Shakerag Blue, the Cumberland, and the Fredonia in one room. And the other aging room is all the washed rind cheeses, which includes the Walden, the Dancing Fern, the Coppinger, and the Gruetli. So like I said, anywhere from about 20 days to 6 months or longer, depending on the cheese. There's a lot of labor, a lot of love, a lot of really hard work that goes into that phase of cheese making. And essentially, in a lot of ways, that's everything. We know the day that it's made, whether or not we hit our targets with the pH curve or, all those little steps that happen very quickly in one day. But then the real challenge is maintaining the environment and, really guiding every single wheel of cheese towards its, most perfect finished product ending. And that's been, I'd say, over the past 10 years since we started making cheese. And we were very naive when we began trying to become a dairy farm and make cheese all at the same time. And the types of cheeses that we chose to make being somewhat complicated and challenging. The affinage portion of our business and how we do it now versus how we were doing it when we began making cheese, I think that is where we have grown and developed and improved more than any place. And I'm telling you, cheese making and dairy farming, there's always room for improvement. That you're never really finished. The work is never done. It's just a lifelong career of study and improvement. And so I feel like the results of our current cheeses really are very, that really goes a long way towards just showing off how far we've come in the aging room and how much more skilled our affinage is. And that's Matt that I mentioned in the staff photo. He's a huge asset to our business. So Walden is our first cheese, which actually is the latest, the most recent development in our product lineup. And we're really excited about Walden. I'd say it's still very much a work in progress, like most of the cheeses, but especially because how new and different this cheese is from everything else that we've made. And the way that I always start talking about Walden is to compare it to Dancing Fern, and I really want to get away from that. But I'm still learning how to describe to describe Walden, and I think that it's going to take on an identity of its own. The longer we're making it, and the better we get at kind of understanding how good this cheese can be. But this is just the first year, and I'm really excited about how well that it's turned out, and very excited about the response that we've gotten so far from our customers. Walden is the first pasteurized cheese that we've ever made. I sort of skipped over that when I was giving some of the background, but we've always been raw farmstead cow's milk cheese production. And we decided in 2019 to invest in a pasteurizer, and to give us the ability to diversify the product lineup, as well as sort of diversify the source of milk. So we have our own herd. Like I said, we're dedicated to maintaining that. And what we're hoping to do this year and in 2021 is to really start utilizing the milk from the only other surviving dairy in the Sequatchie Valley, Johnson Dairy, which is located about 20 miles away from us. And so we'll be adding to our cheese production without having to add to our dairy production by utilizing this milk from Johnson Farm. And so this product, Walden, is our first prototype, really the only one that we have currently in the works as far as pasteurized cheese goes. And so it's, a learning curve, of course. But what we want to accomplish with this, and the reason why I have to always sort of compare it to Dancing Fern, is Dancing Fern's been one of our most, I'd say, well-known and sought after, and certainly the most award-winning cheese that we make. But it's problematic for retailers. And it has a high perishability once the wheel is cut into. We've just had, kind of just an excessive amount of waste associated with Dancing Fern in the retail scenario. So we want Walden to be what Dancing Fern can't be, because Dancing Fern is a little bit larger format. It's hard to retail the whole wheel as a single unit. Walden is only 7 ounces. It's designed to be very similar in characteristics to Dancing Fern, sort of fit that niche in the retail case, but be a very much more friendly, easy, grab and go, retail ready size. So that there's no handling, there's no cutting down of the wheel, and to hopefully eliminate that issue that we've had with perishability. And with Walden, I think it's obviously, it's the youngest and somewhat mildest of the cheeses that we have on the lineup. So it seemed like the best one to start with. And I particularly like Walden with the honey. I love the honeycomb. I appreciate Counter's suggestion of including that. And I hope a lot of people were able to do that with their tasting kits. I've already been, I had to get into that honeycomb right away and give that a taste. And it's awesome with the Walden, as well as with a little glass of bubbly, which is what I decided I would go with for this tasting for myself. But yes, Eric and Nora, please chime in and give us your thoughts on Walden, because I'm so curious to hear, people, cheese professionals out there who work with lots of cheeses and, know the cheese world better than I do. What are your thoughts and what do you like about it?
Totally. Well, we are located in Charleston, South Carolina. We call ourselves a small cheese distributor and ager. We do have aging caves as well for some of our cheeses. We started off selling mostly to restaurants and businesses in the Charleston area. Now, especially with the pandemic, we've definitely shifted to like direct to consumer. We do mail order, we ship all around the country, and deliver locally as well. So yeah, that's our deal.
Our main mission is to support like small cheesemakers primarily from around the Southeast. But American cheesemakers in general.
Mhm.
And yeah, we've been working with Sequatchie for 4 years now, I think.
Something like that. A while.
But yeah, we're super excited about Walden as their first pasteurized cheese because I do think that it like really exemplifies just like this amazing quality milk. And I also think that's why it goes with the honey particularly well. It's sort of like that milk and honey situation. And Padgett's probably right on the money for pairing it with bubbly. It's just like it's sort of like an excuse to eat butter, so you need some sort of effervescence to sort of lighten things on the palate. But yeah, we're a huge fan of Walden.
That was really interesting to hear, like how you guys came to it, like as going along with like Dancing Fern and the perishability of Dancing Fern. Because this, I mean, Walden is it for a bloomy rind cheese. It holds up so well, and I feel like it satisfies like when you want something very decadent and like brie-like kind of, but it's not like super oozy and hard to deal with. It's just like kind of the perfect little round.
Amazingly delicate rind, which is that's like for having bloomy rinds like that, I mean it's all you want out of this type of cheese. So.
Yeah. What was the tasting note? Oh, Eric had an interesting tasting note earlier.
I mean, the rind is super delicate, but it also sort of imparts like this, there's like fungal notes going on, but also it's sort of like this like doughy, yeasty thing. So like the whole combination of butter and like mild yeastiness sort of results in like shortbreadiness to me. Which also would probably be great with champagne.
Right. A little shortbread and Walden and bubbly. That sounds so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Walden and I like Dancing Fern. It's, kind of along the same lines with something sweet, honey or fig preserves, and something light and like crisp, like a white sparkling wine or, any kind of really crisp, light-bodied white or light red wine.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, beer. I mean, beer can kind of go with any cheese, so just because of the effervescence. So that's always fun too.
What are you pairing it with, Michael?
Well, I've been pairing this bloomy rind style cheeses with a variety of spreads and honeys and that. And so today, I thought I would take us down a path of being a little more, I guess, traditional. And I'm going to use a fig spread, and this is Virginia chutney. I think that this is such a well-made cheese. When you look at the rind here and just how beautiful this paste is. It has such a nice earthy aroma. It's got a lot of mildness considering that, this is not a triple creme, but it certainly responds like it. So I have the fig chutney on here, fig spread. And I kind of like having a little bit more earthiness to this. And then to give it a little bit more sweetness and to give it a nice little vehicle, I'm using the Effie's pecan biscuits. And so, that for me, that works out really well. And again, I've been utilizing this style for some time. And I paired this up with, this is the Bell's Brewery Oberon. This is an American wheat ale. And so you see how cloudy it is and all that. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring some light grain to the flavor, kind of like having a light cracker to it. That's what I got.
Yeah. Very.
Yeah, sounds great. Very nice. Well, I'm very curious about what other, folks are doing with Walden because, like I said, I'm still kind of practicing talking about it and just being able to, very articulately, describe and, give the pairing suggestions, since it's still so new, and just trying to get away from always, starting with the comparison with dancing fern. But it is a little bit like a juvenile dancing fern. I mean, that's what it's sort of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All the
Much more
aromatic
approachable.
and then the paste. It's like it's going there. It's just in the juvenile stage.
Yeah.
I guess. But I love the rind. I'm really happy with the rind. We actually do want it to be a little bit softer, like the paste itself, to let it kind of get a little bit pudgier. So we're still working on the targets and, the pH curve and all that kind of stuff that will help us, really zero.
I do think what you said about, especially for like retailers, I mean, it's been, I don't think we've been able to keep it in stock for more than like 2 or 3 weeks, but it is a cheese that, like, I mean, we'll bring one home right when we get it and cut into it, and then like near the end of our stock, we'll cut into it 3 weeks later, and it's like it holds up so beautifully for
awesome.
rind.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. That's great feedback. We released this cheese at about 20 days, between 20 and 30 days, but we're kind of trying to design it to be ready closer to the 20-day point. And then shelf life from that point would have, we really feel like it could get 60 days old overall. So you still got a good 40 days.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So I feel like that's, a pretty generous amount of shelf life on that cheese. And so it's still a work in progress, and stay tuned for more on that. We are, like I said, we're supplementing our own milk supply with Johnson Farms milk from down the road, primarily for making Walden, and then secondarily, we'll put some of that milk into Shakerag, as well as the other blue Fredonia. But we're just starting, since the pandemic hit, all of our plans for 2020 just kind of got thrown up in the air for a few months, but we're kind of getting our feet back on the ground. 2 weeks ago, I think, it was 2 Mondays ago was when we started picking up milk again from Johnson Dairy. So we are sort of boosting the Walden production, and I'm really excited for the rest of the third quarter, and then definitely the fourth quarter, just to kind of see how much momentum we can build with this cheese. But so far so good, and I feel like it's a big part of our future. So it's kind of exciting to start, introducing people to it and really start talking about it in more of an official kind of way. So yeah, okay. Cumberland is, as you can see from the photo, a natural rind tome, and the one that I have here looks very similar, but it doesn't always look like that. Like I said, the Cumberland goes wild. We really like to let it express itself so that it does sort of embody, I think, more than any of the other cheeses, because of the lack of control, I guess, in the aging room. But, the intent of a tome is to, let that milk express itself. It's 100% farmstead, and will remain that way, and 100% unpasteurized. So we will not be changing our recipe for cheeses like Cumberland or Gruetli or some of the other ones that we're tasting this evening, by adding the pasteurizer and supplementing with other milk. But Cumberland is very much sort of the culmination of what was going on, number one, in the pasture with the animals, in the aging room, how the milk is behaving, what flavors, aromas, textures are being expressed over the course of the aging time of Cumberland, which is about a minimum of 3 months up to around 6 months. And I really feel like Cumberland, in its most recent evolutional point in time, because this is a work in progress. Like I said, from the very beginning, Cumberland was our first cheese in 2010. So we've been really working on this one for a full decade now. And I feel like it's never been better. A lot of that has to do with, all the improvements that we've made in the aging room, and just really being able to dial in how we're handling our product. and maintaining the climate control in there. That's another really important component that we've been able to improve over the past 2 years or so. And I think Cumberland really shines for all those reasons, the milk quality and all the attention that is paid to it over the course of its aging. But that rind is, on the surface, there's so many different organisms really showing up on the surface of that rind. But the thing that's the most notable, and I feel like the one that I get the most feedback, not necessarily bad feedback, but just questions regarding, is this okay, is the mucor that's on the Cumberland. And that's something that's been very recently we were pushing for that and really cultivating that intentionally in our aging room. And the mucor is the very fuzzy, almost felt like gray growth that you'll see on the rind. And these Cumberlands are still, I'd say, in sort of intermediate age. They're between 3 and 4 months old at this point, I guess. Because we've been making a little bit less cheese this year, our production shrunk a little bit in 2020, and we've been selling through the inventory. It's not sitting around as long this year, so we're sort of selling it a little younger, which is fine. I still think it's excellent. But what I learned from 2019, because we made so much cheese and a lot of it just continued to sit in the aging room a lot longer than we had originally planned. But the benefit of that was to see how well it ages out to a 5 or 6 month point in time. And I think this cheese just gets better and better. From month 3 to month 6, it gets sweeter. There's a lot more depth of flavor. The rind continues to sort of evolve. The gray growth really becomes the most dominant thing, and it just looks like a solid gray kind of fur. And we pat it down. So, when you receive that wheel, it's like, kind of flat and there's texture there, but in the, it's hard to tell in that photograph, but if you go in the aging room and you really look at a wheel of Cumberland, like as it's in development in person, you can see that mucor is like standing up like fur. And it's just wild. It's something that, if I didn't understand it as well as I do, I would be just as kind of, like bewildered by it as we, a lot of our customers, a lot of the chefs, a lot of people who've been buying Cumberland for years, just over the past year or so, they receive a wheel and then I get an email with a photograph, like, is this okay? This cheese looks really, really like fuzzy, like what's going on, So we've had to explain the mucor thing a lot, but mucor is a very traditional species for like tome production. And it took us a while to really get it to kind of take hold in our aging room. And so that's kind of a big deal for cheese geeks, I think. People that really, are kind of looking for this type of thing, and you just can't really find a whole lot of it in the US. So that's something that I think from the very beginning, when Nathan went to France and became very inspired by all the, the cheese making and the traditions and what he encountered there, this was one of the things that he envisioned, trying to like create from our place, our milk and our location and our, animals, and how our tome would express itself and, become sort of its own unique product that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And so that's just been kind of a work in progress for like 10 years now, and I'm pretty proud of it. And I hope that, and as far as pairing, I really never found anything that's not pretty agreeable with Cumberland. It's the most versatile. It's the one that I just use, in my kitchen for everyday cheese. So I like it with all kinds of beverages. And,
yeah.
But always, please, I really need more education so that I can articulate pairings better. So jump in.
Yeah, in terms of pairing, I do think it goes with so many different things. One of the tasting notes that I had upon tasting this batch was, this is like very specific, but it tastes like buttermilk buckwheat pancakes to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have like, it's like Cumberland the paste is always like buttery, but it also has like this great acidity. So you get sort of like this buttermilky thing. And then, yeah, that like the mucor or like the cat fur development sort of lends like this really like earthy depth to it. And it just like, it tastes like so rustic. And I do think you guys did an amazing job, like, especially for, like Nora and I worked in different cheese shops in New York for the earlier part of our career. And you would see so much, so many different producers making Tome de Savoie and like so many different wheels of Tome de Savoie or Tome Creuse coming in the United States. And I don't think any of them ever tasted this good. I mean, maybe it's because they were like on a boat for 4 weeks or something.
Yeah.
But this is like, I mean, we always tell everybody like this is like what we think Tome de Savoie should taste like.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment because that is the cheese. That's the one that, you know, was the most inspiring to Nathan. And
yeah.
where was our kind of, you know, the springboard point for Cumberland for us.
Right.
Yeah. And in terms of pairing, I mean, we've been making like this really dark, like Danish rye bread for like the whole pandemic, which lasts a really long time. It's super dense. It's like very, very flavorful. So it goes great with that, but also like,
I mean, it goes great with all the cheeses.
yeah. But also like I feel like any fruit, like whether it's like jam or fresh fruit, just goes really well with Cumberland all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I pretty much just like eat it with an apple or,
Yeah.
I really like something kind of acidic, a little bit like tomato jam. That's kind of a nice like combo with Cumberland or some sort of cherry preserves, something like that. But, or salty, you know, salami. It just goes any direction pretty much. So the thing I've noticed in this particular wedge that I have, I'm really getting it. And maybe I haven't been doing this very often lately since Cumberland has sort of gained a little bit more time. This is probably at least a month older than the last time I really was studying Cumberland. But I get this strong buttered popcorn. It's like butter popcorn, like movie theater popcorn smell, but then it doesn't really translate on the palate exactly like that. The acidity kind of comes in and comes through, you know, and there's some, it changes, but there's just something, you know, it just reminds me of movie theater popcorn. And then there's like a caramel, like the older it gets, what I realized last year when I loved about it as we got into the 5 or 6 month old batches, it has that like buttered popcorn on the front and like a caramel kind of on the back end that works nicely. This one I think is still like, it's not quite there yet for that caramel thing, but it's I can sense that it's coming on. So, yeah, a little like later in the year we'll probably be getting to that point, but yeah.
That's a fun idea, like the different flavors of popcorn.
Yeah, who doesn't like that? Caramel and butter popcorn.
Yeah.
You know, when you said that it tasted a little like the pancakes, I was thinking, yeah, that was my first impression as well. I really like that. I like that it's almost the sourdough because it has that tang to it, you know, flavors in there. So what I decided to do with it is I have a Savannah bee honey, and that's their whipped honey with lemon. And so one of the things that I thought about it was because it has that pancakey flavor and that I really wanted to have something that would be able to kind of, I guess, dress it up a little bit. And so it works with the rind as well. The rind on this is definitely edible. I mean, it adds to that little bit of flavor. So, you know, I went with the honey. And then, you know, if you wanted to have a little bit more structure, Effie's, they do a oat biscuit that works really well with it. And I know you're using grain as well. And for the beer, I'm staying with the same. You know, this is that American wheat just adds that biscuit flavor to it and kind of helps clean the palate. So that's where I'm at.
Totally.
Yeah, sounds good. Very good. Yeah, I love that. I just wrote down buttermilk buckwheat pancake. um, yeah, I love the language and you guys, Eric and Nora. I love the descriptions of the cheeses that you have on your website, and anyway, it's a lot of fun, and I feel sort of like I'm a student of each about cheese. Like that's a skill set, and I'm trying to get better at it.
And it's funny to, I mean, it's funny to hear like all the different, or like there's so many different sides of the industry, and like hearing you talk about like cheese making is like there's so many things that are like, oh, like so many like oh moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's always, I don't know, we try and make like all of our stuff on the website like fun and approachable. Like we want like cheese to be like something that, you know, is not something that
Snooty.
people, yeah, like it should be something approachable, and you should be eating it like every day, and
Yeah.
and having fun with it. So we try not to take it too seriously.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For sure. Need more of that. Okay, up next, I believe we are getting to the Gruetli. And I definitely want to give Eric and Nora the floor on the Gruetli because they're really working with Gruetli a lot. This cheese for us was another one that Nathan envisioned from the beginning, where we were really inspired by the Alpine cheeses, you know, the Comte, the Abondance, the Beaufort. Like those were 100% the number one like thing that Nathan fell in love with. And then quickly, you know, brought me right down, you know, along that road with him. But he had just, you know, really always envisioned having a kind of style as part of our product line. And, but it's been a sort of a lesser known cheese as far as what most people know of from Sequatchie Cove Creamery. We do less wholesaling and, you know, less distributor oriented sales with Gruetli for several reasons, but the real big one is that this cheese ages the better part of a year, a minimum of 6 months, maybe more like 10 or so really on average. So it's a really, really slow learning curve. And that, I think, has kept us from, you know, scaling up or really feeling sure of ourselves as far as, you know, investing too much milk into this particular. So it's something that we've leaned on when we're very heavy in the milk, you know, like peak season where we really just need to put milk somewhere because we just can't handle all of it, you know, going out the door, and, you know, kind of a too concentrated period of time. So we bank the milk in the Gruetli. So what we are eating is from 2019. You know, all the Gruetli that we've been selling in 2020 is from the previous year, and so on. So it's something that we have to really wait a long time for to see the results. You know, so if we make a change, if we tweak the recipe, if we do something different in the aging room, you know, to really understand what we did and how it affected the finished product, it's so slow. So this year, well, 2019, we made a decent amount. I feel like we kind of made a jump from 2018 to 2019 in terms of how much we were producing, because we were getting a little bit more confident that what we were going to do, I mean, what we were doing was going to produce like, you know, kind of the target finished product. And so I feel like Nathan's level of confidence and enthusiasm for making more Gruetli has really just grown in the past couple of years. Number one reason, our aging room has been, you know, vastly improved, and our ability to maintain the temperature and the humidity and really manage it really well. You know, that has everything to do with how well the Gruetli turns out. So I love this cheese. This is another like everyday cheese for me. And I think Cumberland definitely, like my farmers market customers who've been sort of, you know, the beginning of our business and where we, you know, started was going to the farmers market, and, you know, the Cumberland and the Gruetli being the two most popular cheeses at the farmers market. But I feel like Gruetli's sort of got an edge on Cumberland almost these days because it's just really good. And people, you know, they're like, wait, I've never even heard of this. Wait, let me try that one, you know, and then they're hooked and they, you know, Cumberland's still a favorite, but I feel like Gruetli has really grown with popularity because, you know, we've just made a lot of improvements. And, but that leads me to say, let Eric and Nora talk about what they do with the Gruetli, because that's really special. And we're so excited to be able to collaborate with you on it.
So like Nora was saying earlier, we do have an aging facility where we're mostly doing long-term aging projects. So Gruetli's currently in the cave, and we also have some hardware, which is like a Pecorino style from 20 Paces in Virginia. But I think like when we first tasted Gruetli, we got super excited about it because it definitely, and I think even on our website, we even say it's like Padgett, like you were saying, it's like this amazing in between of like Comte, Abondance, and Beaufort. Like it's like it has like the sort of like mild nuttiness of like Comte, but then there's like especially this current batch that we're eating has like these sort of, you're beginning to taste like these like wild, like really like wildflower or like green garlic notes. You just sort of start to get like little hints of like things that are like a little further reaching than just like the mild nuttiness, like caramelly flavors and like the tropical fruity thing. It's starting to come out a little bit more. So we wanted to sort of age some Gruetlis out and see what direction it went in. And last year we were really happy with how I think we had.
Last year was the first time we did it, right?
Yeah. I think we had. I think we maybe only had one wheel last year. So
but they are big wheels. So.
Yeah, like 25-pound wheels. So we had 25 pounds that we only sold like through our retail avenues. This year we have 2 wheels in the cave, but probably want to try and get some more from you guys. But yeah, and I think we're just super excited about this style because I feel like a lot of cheesemakers make Alpine style cheeses, but I don't know that any are this, like, I don't know. I think you're hard pressed to find something as balanced as Gruetli. Like it sort of has like in its younger age, it has like this really pleasing, like approachable, like caramelly, like brown butter, like a little bit of fruitiness. But like once it gets older, it's just, we've found that it ages out so beautifully, which I think that's with I think that probably speaks to your milk quality and your cheese making practices. But I think with a lot of other Alpine styles, like things start to get a little weird and crazy, and sort of tingly and
oh yeah, we've had plenty of the tingly stuff. Well, many batches of tingly cheese. But yeah, it's a learning curve, and it just takes time to figure it out. And but whenever Nathan's excited about a cheese, that means like we're growing in the right direction, because he's always like his worst critic, and you know, he's just like quick to kind of like find the wrong thing about it, you know, with whatever cheese it is. And so lately he's just had a lot of positive things to say about Gruetli, so that makes me pretty excited about the future on that cheese.
Yeah.
I think that this has such a nice spiciness to it. You really get that richness. You get the maltiness out of it. You really get that cooked butter and roasted nutty flavor. I just really love that. I think it's a great example of a true Alpine cheese. So when I was thinking about it, I wanted to put in a little bit of fruit to it. So I went with Bonnie's jams, and this is an apricot and orange. And you know, one of the things about this is that this cheese stands up to it. It's not like it's going to get lost. So you can really slather this on and really get, you know, get it nice and gooey and rich. It's just got so much of a flavor that you can go up against this cheese. And so you can really pair this with a wide variety. You know, as Nick said earlier, that, you know, they can't really go wrong with this one because it has such a great diversity of being able to work with the different flavors. And for beer wise, I went up with, this is Cigar City. This is a Maduro Brown. This is a local brewery here. And it is super malty. You can see how dark this is for a brown ale. And I really wanted to bring out the butter and the nuttiness of the cheese. And so that's the job of the Maduro Brown.
Sounds really good. I've got my bubbly, which I think is a good go-to for the Gruetli as well. But but I'm really interested. I'm writing all this down as you guys are talking because I'm interested in getting a little better at like anticipating like what's the right beer pairing for our cheeses. I'm a little more of a wine person, I guess, but I've got nothing against beer. I just have a little less confidence or experience, like knowing which way to go with it. So this is excellent information. And I really love Eric's description when he said green garlic. I totally get that, like, but I wouldn't have come up with that, you know, myself. So it's just fun. This is great. I'm learning a lot.
A lot of times the beverage can change the cheese, help it out a little bit, bring out more butters on here. But actually, this cheese makes the beer better because it adds, instead of just being malty, it adds a nuttiness to it. So it's kind of like a nut brown ale instead of that. So, you know, you get a big bonus with it by it actually bringing more of the beer flavors out as well. So kind of nice that way. And it doesn't take anything from the cheese. You know, the cheese just can stand up to it. So
Up to it.
nice,
Right.
nice fun little pairing.
Yeah, sounds great. I like the idea of the citrus, like a marmalade kind of combo with it. Sounds really good.
Yeah, the orange works really well. You know, having a little sweet apricot, but that citrus can bring out a little more of that, that wonderful. It's almost like the butter is, you know, you're getting ready to fry an egg and you got the butter in the pan, it's starting to melt. That's the kind of butter that I taste out of this. It's just so nice and clean and, you know, not overly rich, but it blends really well with the slight nuttiness of the cheese. Very well done. And the rind is magnificent.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with it myself. And sadly, we're coming to the end of the 2019 Gruetli supply. So we're going to have a little gap, but and like I said, we're making a lot this year, but it's just going to need a little bit of time before we will have any 2020 Gruetli ready. It's probably going to be, you know, solidly in the fourth quarter before it's ready. So so get it now while it's still around. All right, what's next? We have Bellamy Blue. And the Bellamy is one of 3 blue cheeses that we make. It is what I would consider the most sort of like a cave aged. It's definitely a natural rind blue. It hasn't always been. Originally, Bellamy was a waxed blue cheese, but what we've always done is at the very beginning, you know, a week or two, we rub the cheese, we rub the Bellamy with applewood smoked sea salt. And that is to sort of influence the flavor and then, but not too much. We really want it to be a subtly smoky kind of, you know, note, I think, in the flavor profile so that it's not overly smoky. And the cheese quality, you know, what's going on really in the cheese comes through, and the smokiness is just sort of a, you know, kind of enhances the whole tasting experience. But I think it was 2017 or 18 when we decided to transition away from waxing the Bellamy to creating more of a cave-aged natural rind blue. And I think quality-wise, it improved quite a bit. So this Bellamy is actually our first batch of 2020. So this is a relatively young batch of Bellamy. We're making a lot less Bellamy this year because we're just generally making a little less cheese overall, but the Shakerag is kind of getting the lion's share of the milk, and Bellamy's a little bit less, a little fewer and far between, like only a couple of batches a month that we've been producing so far. But I love this first one. I guess now it's probably about 3 months old, maybe not quite even, somewhere between 2 and 3 months. So it's a super young batch of cheese for a blue. When we were waxing the Bellamy, we were aging in at least 4 to 6 months. Now the natural run Bellamy, we really like it more between 3 and 4 months. So I think this is just barely, you know, on the young end of the age spectrum. But I love Bellamy for its a little bit more straightforward quality. You know, it's very savory. It's got that, you know, mineral component. It's salty, but hopefully not overly salty. I think it complements stone fruits really well. I love Bellamy with dried cherries and Bellamy. That's just like something I'll just like literally eat, like little morsel with one cherry, and I love that combination. I really love Bellamy with dessert wines. I think something sweet and rich really just sort of offsets and complements the flavor of the Bellamy, brings out the smokiness a little bit. But it is, it's just a beautiful blue, and it's a little bit less sort of specialized than the other two blues that we make, and more just kind of for the all-purpose blue cheese lover. Somebody, you can easily make blue cheese dressing with this. It pretty much goes on any salad. It's excellent, you know, crumbled on a steak or like a blue cheese burger. It's just kind of the most straightforward go-to, straight up good cave-aged blue cheese. And so I would say, you know, for that reason, it's probably the next most popular cheese that we sell at our farmers market. So what do you guys think about Bellamy?
Well, I mean, I've obviously loved all of these cheeses, but when I took a bite just now, I was like, this is so good. I feel like, you know, when I'm tasting cheese, it's often like when I've just taken it out of the fridge, I'm cutting an order or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, I haven't had this in a while. But this, I feel like we got it to the perfect temperature, and not only for the flavor, but for the texture, I feel like getting it up to room temp, like just makes it very luscious. So I'm really digging it.
Yeah, this Bellamy has always sort of reminded me of like, or it just makes me think of cured meat, because it, I mean, the smoked sea salt aspect combined with your guys' raw cow's milk, just sort of like, I mean, there's 3 months of age on it now, so you just sort of get like some meaty things going on, and then even like the natural rind thing on top of that, it's like, it's sort of like the casing on like some small salami producer. Like it's like really the whole picture. And yeah, I think it always has so much depth. It's like this like really rich, like yolky thing going on. It's like palate coating. But yeah, it's like earthy, a little spicy, has like a hint of like sweetness to it. Yeah, it's such an amazing blue. And we've actually at one of our farmers markets that we do, there's a raw milk producer, and she constantly talks about using Bellamy to make buttermilk dressing. Like she uses her raw buttermilk and is always using Bellamy in it.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, one of our, actually Ken, who works with us on the dairy, his wife came up with an awesome blue cheese dressing recipe for the holidays and made a bunch for her friends using Bellamy. And it is just like top-notch blue cheese dressing. Yeah, it just makes me want like a plate of wings.
Yeah.
You know, like, give me some Bellamy and some wings. But yeah, it's so meaty. It's like, and I just now, like as you were talking about it, and just like, I decided to just eat the rind, you know, just by itself. And yeah, the smoke is so subtle. There's just something like, it's there, but delicious, well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think, it's obviously very young, it hasn't even gotten close to like any kind of ammonia,
Yeah.
which it will tend to go there, the older it gets, especially this particular cheese. I think the ammonia can be a little bit stronger. But I like this really fresh, young Bellamy.
Yeah.
It's, this is again, like a little bit unusual because we generally have made a lot more cheese and it's been sitting a little bit longer by the time we're selling it. So it's really in like a 4 to 5 month point, but I think between 3 and 6 months, a little bit like the Cumberland, that's the optimum window from when we're happy with it and, feel like it's ready for release. It's adequately mature, but still has a really nice long shelf life. So yeah, and it's been gaining popularity. I think, it's a little bit lesser known and definitely not as popular as the Shakerag, but it holds its own and it's got like a dedicated fan base. So it's not going anywhere. And like Cumberland and like Gruetli, it's 100% farmstead, 100% unpasteurized milk, and that will be the case. So we're not altering anything about our Bellamy production. So yeah. What do you think about it, Michael?
This has got such a nice earthiness to it. A lot of people talk about they try a blue and they're not a big fan, and there's so much difference. This is a great illustration of a beautiful blue that has some earthiness. It's not over salty. It's not over tangy. It's got some nice buttery flavors to it with a little bit of a mushroom. This is really a very classic and easily to snack on, eat style of blue. So, when you and I were in Atlanta, when we did a show together, I don't know if you met Lori Krieger, but she does these amazing taste elevated spreads and that. And this one is when you were talking about dried cherries, this is booze time cherries, where she soaks these in amaretto and spices and thyme. And so it's this beautiful cherry that's just so rich and just crazy in flavor that works really well with this blue cheese. So they pair up really well. And typically I step up the pairing to be a little more intense. And I originally pulled out a hazy IPA, and because of the earthiness here, I'm going to stick with the brown ale. And with the brown ale, the booze time cherries, and the cheese, it's just a mouthful of rich, malty, cherry, buttery flavor.
Yeah, I think Bellamy always makes me want, Fredonia too, but Bellamy always makes me want like English beer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, brown ales or like English pale ales. The super malty stuff goes really well with Bellamy.
I do a lot of pairings, and I'm going to give that top 10 in the world. They're so magnificent. It's so rich, the flavors you get, what a blue should be. So balanced and buttery. So magnificent.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like this, as I'm tasting it, and like I really want some cherries right now, and I don't even have any. My son is a huge cherry, that's his favorite thing, so he just consumes everything in the kitchen. But I'm having my bubbly with it, and it's probably just not quite the right combination, but it's okay. But you're like, that's really exciting. I think this cheese, being as young as it is, like it's just really only getting started, with like where it's going in that buttery, like super like just rich direction. But I'm gonna have to get my hands on some brown ale and some cherries.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing probably after this is I'm gonna get a little bourbon and go with the bourbon cherries in this, because I think that would be an exceptional little just before dinner, and get a little Friday night adjustment.
Yeah, right on. Sounds so good.
Sounds great. Cool.
Okay, well, so the final cheese in the lineup would be the Shakerag Blue, last but not least. And this, I think, is hands down the most popular cheese that we make. The one that we dedicate the most milk to. We're making more of it than anything else, and we're selling it all. We constantly are back ordered on this cheese. It's kind of like we created a leaf whiskey wrapped monster. This cheese is such a labor of love. It's so overwhelming, the amount of work that goes into it, but it's so worth it every year. And at this point in the year, especially like the month of July and August are the peak season. That's our time for gathering the fig leaves. And that's my job. So that is the one thing that I do that's like a production component. So I'm not entirely absent from production, but my job is to acquire as many fig leaves as I can during this point in the year. And I have several sources around the city of Chattanooga where I harvest the leaves myself, or they are harvested for me and brought usually to the farmer's market. And I actually have a handful of customers that bring me leaves and they get cheese. So like you can actually get cheese in exchange for fig leaves at the Main Street Farmers Market in Chattanooga. So I guess cheese does grow on trees sometimes, but for the most part, I harvest myself, and we actually have 40 fig trees of our own that we planted on our 5 acres here in Jasper, Tennessee. So it's a giant effort. We probably harvest at least 50,000 leaves. I mean, not kidding, like somewhere between 50 and 60,000 leaves. It's like insane. And it takes weeks, and it's of course the hottest part of the year, and I got to get out there, and those fig trees feel like sandpaper. I mean, like I kind of have to like cover my face, my arms, my hands, my neck, everything, because I get up in the tree and I'm like reaching all around, because most of the best leaves are in the understory of the tree where it's shady, because that's where they get like big, broad and a little less lignified. So that's the ideal leaf, but we try to use, every leaf that we can. And so we harvest those leaves, then we submerge them in food grade buckets full of whiskey, Chattanooga whiskey to be exact. So that's a partnership that we have with Chattanooga Whiskey, our local distillery in the city of Chattanooga, and they are awesome to work with. So at this point in the year, we're buying like, carloads, cases of whiskey. Nathan actually just picked up about 12 cases today. So we'll be able to cook some leaves and get them in the whiskey this week. But they're harvested, they're trimmed down, they're cooked in a steam sterilizing autoclave type of container. It's like just a big cauldron that steam sterilizes them. And that obviously, is a sanitary step, but then it also sort of softens the texture of the leaves. Then they are submerged in whiskey. And then those leaves sit in the whiskey for several months. So what we're harvesting right now is really going to be the very tail end of 2020 and the bulk of our 2021 cheese production. So that's a giant undertaking. But Shakerag is aged anywhere from 6 to 12 months. I think this batch that we're eating tonight, it's batch 257. So that is just about a year old. It will be a year old, I think, at the end of August. So we're like, this is a very, very old batch of Shakerag, which is kind of cool to contrast with the Bellamy, which is a very, very young, sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum for the blue cheeses that we make. But Shakerag is the one forgiving thing about it is that we can make the Shakerag, we can keep making it, and not worry too much about the fig leaf supply, because it gets waxed. And once it's in that wax, it has a really long period of time where it can just hang out. It's in a cold storage. It's not in the aging room anymore. It's in a very cold, like 40-degree giant walk-in cooler, which is also an aging room that we use for the blue cheeses. So it's stored cold. It's aging, but very, very slowly. And so we have anywhere from 4 to 8 months or so once it's in the wax to then, get around to wrapping that batch with the fig leaves. Then we cryovac seal the wheels. So cryovacking them sort of like holds those leaves on and molds those leaves onto the outside of the wheel and forces the whiskey sort of, into the paste of the cheese. And we found, since we've been cryovacking the Shakerag, which happened, I'd say the beginning of 2019, a little over a year ago, the results of the finished product have just, skyrocketed. Like it's just, better than ever, quality wise and shelf life wise, and just like flavor and everything is just like, it's a bomb of flavor. So you get, the traditional blue cheese, it's a Roquefort style. It's a lot like the Bellamy the day that it's made. And then the differentiating factors begin in the aging where, Bellamy is treated one way and then Shakerag goes down a completely different path. But it is, it's in our 50-degree aging room in our cave for the first month or so. And we do let it establish a rind. Then we wax it, cool it way down, let it age for a number of months in that cold temperature. And I think that's really important as well, for slow flavor development so that you don't get too much all at once. You could really, really, I think, enhance the depth of flavor and get a lot more sweetness and a lot more gentle blue cheese flavor that's subtle and it comes across in a very pleasing way that's not completely overwhelming to your palate. If the cheese is aged at that cold temperature. So that's a really important step. And then after the cheese has been in the wax for a number of months, those leaves go on, it's cryovac sealed, and then we try to sell it within about 4 to 6 weeks. So that's the one sort of limiting factor. Once the cheese is in the cryovac, we feel like it really only has, maybe 4 months or so before it needs to be cut open, because that oxygen supply is obviously completely limited. And the one thing that blue cheese needs for that blue veining to, to develop and really come through and express itself is oxygen. So we don't want to deprive the cheese of oxygen for too long. But we found overall that the finished product quality has been just enhanced tremendously by that final step of cryovacking. But I just love this cheese. I pretty much crave it every day, just a little bit. Like I just want to take it like a nibble while I'm cooking dinner, like have a little wine, have a little Shakerag, just straight up. I don't really ever pair it with anything. But I mean, it does pair well with a lot of things. But red wine, I'm kind of a fan of a Petite Syrah and a Shakerag combo. That to me is something that even this time of year, I just want that in the evening. It's my favorite sort of happy hour snack. And I also just bought some salami that was made with whiskey, and I haven't even tried it with the Shakerag yet, but I just thought that might be kind of a fun thing. But it certainly pairs well with the Chattanooga whiskey. Like, to sip some whiskey and eat some Shakerag is a excellent combo. So, I don't know what else I can say about Shakerag. There's just, I can go on and on, but somebody else talk.
Well, it is just a really phenomenal cheese. I mean, I remember us talking one day when we were cutting into a wheel, and it's just like the best cheese that doesn't taste like cheese. It tastes like fruit. Like it's like it tastes like something else, and it's just like it's so crazy how flavorful. I feel like I've never tasted any cheese.
Yeah, even
this
like
flavor pack.
In terms of like, I think we've had a decent amount of like fig wrapped things, but I think you just get like every single like subtlety or like the best parts about fig leaves, which it has like. I feel like because we've done like a few little experiment cheeses, mostly wrapping like just like fresh cheeses in fig leaves and letting them sort of impart the flavor for like a week or so. And I feel like you get this like floral, fruity, like chamomile-y thing, like sort of like vanilla-y, which like also lends itself to the whiskey. But I like, this, I mean, the like level of fruitiness is like, it's like really explosive. It almost reminds me of like juicy fruit gum. Like it's like so huge.
There's so many like fruits in there. There's blueberries and bananas and pineapples, and but like juicy fruit gum, that is definitely
Yeah.
all that combination. And yeah, it's almost like cheese candy or something, like a, you know, if cheese was a Skittle.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be a Shakerag. That yeah, it's as much as it's like a labor headache, and it just is overwhelming. You know, it's by far my favorite cheese. So, yeah.
I think the other, I mean, one thing that I think we've found with carrying Sequatchie stuff is, I mean, obviously, since we only work with American cheeses, and having worked with European stuff for the early part of our career, there were certain things that we missed. Like, I mean, Roquefort is definitely one of them, and I think this totally like nails like what I miss about Roquefort.
Yeah.
And then like same thing with like Gruetli, and like there was like a Swiss cheese called Le Tivaz, which is like a specific like Gruyere, and they choose different herds to source their milk from for it, and that sort of hits that. And then like you guys started making Fredonia, which is like Stilton, and the only other cheese that we like really missed. So I feel like Sequatchie is doing an amazing job on like we don't need any European cheeses at all.
We can do it.
Well, that's certainly the inspiration. You know, that's where it all came from, was those traditional cheeses. And yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with the cheese that you mentioned, comparing to Gruetli, but
yeah, I'll see if we can find some and send it to you guys.
Yeah, I'd love to have like a, you know, compare, contrast tasting with some of the like the real authentic European traditional cheeses. And by no means are we trying to copycat these cheeses, but they are, you know, just like so fundamental, I think, to just, you know, like the existence of great cheese and how we understand what that is today. And so these are like, we're paying our respects to those that came before us, and
yeah,
to, you know, like kind of be as good and, you know, as quality oriented as those cheeses are.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why your cheese is so impressive, is because I think it is like you have as much like emotionally invested, and like you like in terms of like you really want to get it right. Like obviously, as you were saying that you guys started with farming and animal husbandry, like I think that's where all of those, like at least what we get in the States, like the really great European cheeses, that's what really stands out. It's the stuff that's like still people who are like totally like constantly every single day like on their game and continuing to learn. So I mean, I think you guys are definitely sort of a great American representation of that.
This cheese has such, I guess, examples of your terroir, because there's so much of the unique flavors that come across. You know, we mentioned that it has a little bit of resemblance to Roquefort, but it also has resemblance just to you, to what you're producing. You know, a one-off, not copying anybody, but really creating that. And this cheese shows that. It's a beautiful representation of a unique blue, unlike any others. I mean, everything has got similarities to it, but in reality, this is very unique in the fact that it has that fruity sweetness to it that you generally don't find in a blue. But the buttery flavors that come out here are exceptional. And, you know, when I was working on the pairing, and I've been sitting here running it through several other different things, and it just works so well with so many different flavors that I wouldn't say that one would be better than the other. One's going to take it a different direction. So when I looked at this and that I wanted to bring and put a little, I guess, things together. And so this is the Fat Toad Farm Salted Caramel Bourbon. It's a Kentucky straight bourbon in here. And so I thought since we had a little bit of the whiskey in here that it would work really well. And honestly, it does. It's crazy how you really kind of pick that up. No alcohol flavor, but really richness. But, you know, in the same vein, this also worked really well with the booze time cherries. So I did both of them, and it's just great. It's great on its own. I'm staying with the brown ale because it works. You eat it by yourself, and I can see why you need to have this every day, and how well this would work, you know, with a Syrah or a Zin, a red Zin, or even a light cab. This would be magnificent in that area. This is, you know, this would be a cheese that somebody says, okay, I'm on a desert island and I can only have one cheese. There you go.
Right. I just never get tired of it. And it's not that I need much, you know, because a little goes a long way. It's very rich, you know, just overwhelming the palate type of flavor. But it's something that, like, you know, it just helps me kind of like calm down and like get into a more relaxed mindset. It really, it's like a mental health like thing for me, I think. So I never really analyzed it like that so much, but I think that is part of it. And it's just a cheese that's close to my heart. I feel like my hands had something to do with that cheese, unlike the other ones, you know, so maybe that's another part of it that's like an emotional attachment for me. But there's just something about those flavors, and like the fig leaves on their own are kind of coconutty. And then you get like the spicy vanilla, you know, flavors and the aroma, the whiskey, and then just, you know, the savory, like saltiness of the blue cheese just straight up. But although if you just taste a wheel of Shakerag that doesn't get leaf wrapped, but's equally, you know, mature, just straight out of the wax, it's pretty sweet already. It's already kind of going in that direction. But I think there's some magic thing that happens with those flavors when we put them all together. And again, we were, you know, very inspired by traditional European blues, but also admittedly extremely inspired by very famous American cheese, Rogue River Blue, that's wrapped in the Syrah leaves with the pear brandy. And, you know, we really love that cheese. And, you know, we're just obviously inspired in general by Rogue Creamery and all the cheeses that they make, but that one in particular we fell in love with. And I think around 2011, a little bit after we've been making cheese and we're getting a little bit more confident about branching out and maybe trying to make some blues and different styles, we thought it would be, you know, really unique and kind of along the same lines with the, you know, just our philosophy and what inspires us to make cheese to begin with, because it's very close to our, you know, our roots in agriculture and the land and, you know, everything about our particular place and corner of the world, that taking whiskey and fig leaves that are very, you know, highly sort of associated. Fig leaves, maybe not so much, but fig leaves are extremely prolific here. They're, you know, it's very common. Just, you know, people have figs everywhere in their backyards. You know, it's just a really easy to grow tree and something that we could get our hands on. And it's an edible leaf and very aromatic. And we just thought whiskey and fig would create like the flavor of what Rogue does for Oregon, we can do for Tennessee. And so that was another, you know, sort of part of what inspired us to start messing around with this this combination of flavors and ingredients, and we just hit on something that really took off. And you know, like I said, we created a monster because it's just it's insane, like, you know, to make this cheese, but we'll never stop doing it as long as we're making cheese. And then this is one that we are going to expand our production by utilizing the other milk. But it's very important to us that all the milk that we are working with is coming from the Sequatchie Valley. So it's still very close to our local area and right there in the valley. And we have a great relationship with this farmer, and his cows are on grass year round. We have very similar philosophies. So I feel like it's going to do just as much justice to the Shakerag or the Walden, or the Fredonia is the other one we're going to be using it for as our own milk. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, I feel like I've kind of exhausted everything I can think to say about cheese right now. So we can probably start to wrap it up. And thank you again, Michael. I've really had a lot of fun. And Eric and Nora, you guys are so awesome to work with. And it's just great to do this for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Great.
I appreciate everybody coming out. When you were talking about Rogue River Blue, next Thursday, I'm having David on, and we're tasting a 4-year-old Rogue River Blue, a 2016 vintage.
Oh my God. How about that? That's cool.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. Be able to try that and pair that up. That's been trying to think about what I'm going to do with that. But
Sure.
In September, by the way, is Heritage Bourbon Month, and I'm doing a 4-part series with Basil Hayden on their different blends. So I think that this cheese would be a really good fit to one of those segments that I'm working on. So
I agree.
reaching out to you.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'll keep that in mind. When did you say that's going to be?
It's in September. Every Thursday, we're doing a segment with 2 of the Basil Haydens, the 10-year, the backstrap molasses, the traditional. So, we're working through there. And, maybe I can have you slide on that. I have, Pat Ford with Beehive. He did pour me a slice with Basil Hayden. So he's on the first segment with Basil Hayden to talk about doing that. And then, I think that this is a really good one. And I have Satori, who has also a whiskey, Tennessee whiskey version as well. So, yeah.
All right. Excellent.
I think we can do more.
Very
Good deal.
All right. So, I have one slide that I'm going to leave us with at the end here, and that's of all of your cheeses. But I wanted to give you one last opportunity. Is there anything that you'd like to say to anyone or talk about or wrap up about, your farm, your cheese, your life, and anything like that?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like I had every, opportunity that I needed to sort of tell our story and talk about the cheeses and get some tidbits from you guys and continue to be educated on how to talk about cheese, since that's my job. But I know how to talk about our cheeses pretty well, but I'm just not that confident about, the larger world of cheese, because it's such an amazing, huge, expansive world, and there's so much good cheese out there, and we're just honored to be considered part of that that fabric in the United States. And we're just, I think what it comes down to for myself and for Nathan is to be an active part of a farm and keep agriculture alive and well in our community, and create jobs and create more green spaces, and be able to teach others about regenerative agriculture and the way that we produce the food that we produce, so that that mission, as well as just creating a really excellent product and in a successful business, is part of why we do what we do. And so the farming is at the heart of it. And I really appreciate, all the compliments that you guys have given, and, what I think, kind of kept echoing throughout our conversation is, the milk quality really comes through with these cheeses. And, and that's really like the number one priority for us and our philosophy. And just, the whole point is that we're taking a really good care of the land, the animals, the natural resources that we have, and and just trying to create something unique and special that just leaves a really, really strong impression on whoever is consuming it. Whether that's a cheesemonger or a chef, who eats fine foods all the time, or just, someone at the farmer's market who's just seeking out something they want to be more connected to their food and who's producing it. The whole full spectrum of consumers is really important to us, that, that is communicated well, and, our dedication to responsible land stewardship is, is part of that story. So the end.
Yay!
Yeah, for not having anything to say after that, you did a great job. Thank you.
Oh, it just all came out, I'm very unrehearsed. This is not well thought through, but yeah,
It was
that's
beautiful. It was good. It was good. So Nick, you guys got anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that is a great place to leave it. But
Yeah.
we're so appreciative of being included in this. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, and always happy to sell Sequatchie cheese. I'm
Yeah.
very thankful to have them.
Oh, I do. One more thing that I wanted to comment on was just how beautifully presented, packaged, and shipped the tasting kits were. And thank you so much, guys. I mean, like, it's very impressive. I obviously haven't been like mail ordering a whole lot of cheese because I just haven't. I don't really need to do that. But it was really nice to see, the way that it was presented and the helpful information, the tasting cards, and just everything that you enclosed. Like, it was such a nice touch. And
We feel like it needs to be at that caliber or higher for the cheese that we're selling.
Yeah.
So
it was spot on. So
I have to agree. That renewable packaging, not using styrofoam, is outstanding. I really appreciate that. I get 3 to 4 cheese shipments a week here, and I have to say that yours is probably the best one I've received pretty much all the time, because ecologically it is sound. It is really a great way for it to come in. And I also want to compliment you on your individual wrapping, because having the inside wrap on top of the other wrap and the secure tape that you use is outstanding. Beautiful presentation of the wrap cheeses.
thank you. We had some bosses who were sticklers early on, so we can give them credit.
Well, you did a great job. Thank you.
thanks, guys.
All right. Well, everybody, be careful out there. Be safe. Wash your hands. Wear a mask. Do all those fun things and stay out of trouble. Thank you so much for coming by today. And I'm going to leave everybody with a nice image of the group of cheeses. So good night, and be careful and take care. All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.